Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hekatior V8. Quick recapping, in V7 I spotted a major mistake by Jung in assigning abstract concrete to IE, whereas Myers was right in actually shifting it to NS, and I patched the issue of the abstract concrete as it could be done without having to overhaul the whole thing field part. Meaning Hekatior has its own improved version of SOJT embedded in it going forward. Additionally, I elaborated deeply on the concept of multidimensionality as some strong correlative pattern between Hekatior and Big 5. Link to V7 will be in the description for those who haven't watched it already. That being said, let's move to V8. Today's topic is advanced observation about development, as well as on the shadow, including the effect of ADHD on the shadow. And as I did mention to you, I do have ADHD combined as part of my neurodivergence package as one of the predominant traits. That being said, let's start with development. A quick reminder that type can change, as emphasized by Jung in an interview here.
Well, you see, the type is nothing static. It changes in the course of life.
And Jung was right in the statement because as he did elaborate in Hekatior V4. I would say that there are some innate tendencies and the rest is really affected by nurturing and how the individual reacts to the environment and situation and as far as Enneagram is concerned, you are born with your instinct, main core, tri-type, and nurturing affects identifications. When it comes to personalities, is a mix of nature and nurture. Both influence. Let's quickly recap the stage differentiation. Stage 1. In this stage, the person is completely undifferentiated. This development level is usually seen in newborns and childhood in general. During early teen, usually, you will see the person moving from the stage 1 to stage 2. Later, you see a rise of a preferential attitude or of a primary function. Notice the implication. Some people do not have a primary function. Of course, this will be barely, if ever, discussed in the typology community. Anyways, around teenage years, early adulthood, most people will pass from a stage 2 to a stage 3. In other words, the person will tend to have either a preferential attitude and a primary, or a differentiated primary and auxiliary. The types that you see in Psychological Types Chapter 10 are examples of stage 3 types that Jung described in a more extreme version. In my opinion, to show the effect of what happens when the type becomes too extreme, also in stage 3 you can have type, for example, like NT and F and so on, in which the preferential attitude is undifferentiated, and then there is a clear primary and auxiliary. It's interesting to notice that most people will reach stage 3 and then stay there for whole life. And in my opinion, Jung was biased towards the idea that the stage 4 moderate everything there was the ideal one. But if you look at patterns rather than just theorizing what could be the ideal, then you will realize that there are many factors influencing, including the Enneagram. So, for instance, 6s have often an undifferentiated preferential attitude. And it's more likely to see 6s going to stage 4. Some might, but it's really the exception to the rule. Also remember that each 3 types are tendentially more balanced than described in chapter 10 of psychological types. And last and not least, stage 4. In stage 4, the person has a preferential attitude, primary and auxiliary, well defined. This is what systems like MBTI and so on try to impose on everyone, whilst exacerbating all the preference to strong and overly describing types to match specific Enneagram types. And needless to say, the side effects of doing that are disastrous, to say the least, often leading people to develop, for example, 1+ personality disorders and or toxic traits. And especially the MBTI side can be incredibly toxic. Returning to stage 4, if the stage 4 is present with moderate preferences, then yeah, the person is healthy and typically very easy to type. The lower the person is in differentiation stage, the more problematic is to type the person, especially in most recent systems that are too rigid. Notice that if someone is a stage 4 and the preferences are extremely unbalanced, that the person is not healthy. That is as far as stage of differentiation goes. Human psyche is way more flexible than people think. Now to the second topic of today, the shadow. The shadow is basically anything that is repressed within the individual, thoughts, feelings, and so on. And it's what people tend to project on others. The shadow is very personalized, each individual having a unique shadow. So now you can't type people by the shadow. And of course you have all the archetypes in the shadow, the collective unconscious, yada yada. The tertiary is a sort of gateway, and the inferior is the very beginning of the shadow. One more thing to wrap up this episode, ADHD and shadow. When Jung compiled his theory, ADHD wasn't a concept that was formalized back then. ADHD can be seen in 3 main presentations: the inattentive, the hyperactive impulsive, and the combined presentation. I have the third. ADHD is more neurobiological. You are born with it, and brain chemistry does have an influence in this. So it's not entirely archetypes, but you could say that in the case of ADHD, when it comes to Jung, there is in play the shadow possession to some degree. Through a pure Puella complex, arguably also the 3-star archetype playing some kind of role, and overall generating a restlessness in the person. Individuals with ADHD tend to be more aware of the shadow, on average, than people without ADHD in my observations. I guess that's it for today. Stay tuned for more.